and especially looking at the new CloudPBX functionality and also touching on the new conferencing functionality as well. My name's David Hitwell. I'm an Office 365 E5 specialist here at Microsoft, here at Visual. Prior to joining Visual, I worked at Microsoft for a number of years, including a considerable amount of time in the link and Skype for Business part of the organisation. Hence the kind of link in with today's webcast. Joining us today, we've also got Martin Burham, who is the practice manager here for our UC practice, and we have Brian Kane as well, who is he heads up our business group, which we'll come on and have a look at in a second. So if we can first have a look at the agenda we're covering today. So we're going to have we're going to go through introductions, which we have just done. We'll have a quick look at what Visual are and what Visual do, and then we'll have a look at Skype for Business and all our perspective of Skype for Business, and touch on some of the developments that we've seen so far and some of the developments we'll see very shortly. I'll then hand over to Martin, who will go into a more detail about CloudPBX and Skype for Business Online in a bit more technical detail, especially spending time looking at deployment options, because you have the choice of completely on-premise, completely in the cloud, or you have a hybrid option to consider. We'll then go on and have a look at the dark and murky world of licensing very briefly, and some of the offers that Microsoft have out there at the minute to encourage people to move forward on CloudPBX, which may be of interest. We'll then suggest a few next steps, and we'll also have some time at the end for question and answers. So just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. If you have any questions as we go along, can you stick them in the IM window and then we'll come back to them at the end. If you are dialing in, if you could mute your phone, that would be helpful. But also we are recording this session. We'll distribute the link afterwards, and it will be generally available through YouTube and through the other channels we have. So if we start by having a look at Visual. So I assume most people are familiar in some shape or form with Visual at this stage. Visual is really divided into two parts of the organisation. One is a deployment part of the organisation, so this is deploying technology, whether that is a point deployments or whether that's in a more strategic nature, where we're getting multiple parts of the multiple products working together. And then we have the managed services part, which is the sort of after deployment care. Now, whether we have done that deployment, whether another organisation has done that deployment, we can take over the support and running of that particular product. So, to go into that in a bit more detail, as I said, the organisation is really divided into two main parts, consulting and services. Now, we have the business part, which is what Brian heads up, and we have the technology part. And what we're generally seeing is a shift in the marketplace. So the technology part of the organisation will look at, somebody will come to us and say, I'd like to deploy SharePoint, or I'd like to deploy Skype for Business, or Azure, or CRM, whatever it may be. And we deploy that distinct piece of technology for them. However, we are seeing a shift in the marketplace to a more strategic, transformational standpoint. So we're looking at bringing in multiple products at any one time and having to deploy those products and getting them working together. So we're seeing that shift to the business part. And as you can see there, that's made up of, the business part is made up of engagement managers, basic project managers, and architects as well, to ensure that we have an overall view of what the product looks like. We're also building on this now with our own range of solutions, all based on Microsoft technology. So this is, individual applications using the stack. So a great example would be Minerva, which is bringing together various products that are using Office 365. So if I can just take a look at the transformational piece, we basically operate in three areas here: connected business, end-user computing, and optimized service vision. The connected business part is very much about ensuring that the right people have the right information at the right time at the right device. So it's taking the information that's held within an organization and presenting it to the right people at the right time. So a couple of classic examples: ambulance service or a fire service, those vehicles on their way to an incident would need to know who they're going to see, where they're going to see. Are there any circumstances there that they need to know about in terms of structure, in terms of other dangers in the area, such as gas terminals and that kind of thing. So it's getting that information and passing it through at the right time. So it's about surfacing that information up. The next piece is around end user computing, and typical scenarios here are people that want to refresh the desktop, people who want to introduce mobile, want to use flexible working. So it's about ensuring that the information is held securely. It's also about identity piece. It's also ensuring that people have access to the right information at the right time. So it's all about bringing those things together to let people work wherever they want to work, whenever they want to work. And the third piece is around the optimized service vision, which is looking at what happens in the data center. How can we make sure that the data center infrastructure we have in place is right for your organization? So is that an on-premise? Is that in the cloud? Or is that a mixture of the two? So it's having a look. So as I said, those are the sort of three pieces that we're getting involved in, and we're seeing a real shift in the marketplace from people wanting to do those kind of point deployments to the bigger deployments, and also we're seeing a general shift away from large and inflexible outsourcing contracts to people wanting to bring things back in-house and wanting to manage things themselves. So let's move on to Skype for Business, as opposed to looking at what Visual do. So we'll look at four basic areas before we hand over to Martin. One is about the meeting solution, what is offered now, what is going to be offered. Then we're going to have a look at the voice with the CloudPBX. We're looking at Skype across devices, and then we're going to touch on the operator and Microsoft services that sit around Skype that's going to make this a whole package. So the first one is the complete meeting solution. So people are pretty familiar with the idea that Skype for Business is a way for people, remote individuals, to meet together, to share applications, to share their desktop, co-authoring, video, etc. Very much as we're doing here. I think what this does miss off is the fact that actually there is a lot of ad hoc communication that goes on around this as well. So it's not just about let's get together at 10 o'clock. This is about, IMing somebody. Can you do something now? Yes, that's fine. I'm not in a meeting. I'm not doing anything. So it's about IMing. It's about the real-time communication. It's synchronous communication as opposed to asynchronous, send somebody an email, leave them a voice message. It's understanding their presence and then feeding that through and saying, can we do something now? So it's very much allowing the people to work when they want to work, where they want to work from, but ensuring that they're still productive in that environment. PSTN conferencing, this was introduced at the back end of last year. So this is basically a way of people to dial in and out of Skype meetings. The way that Microsoft has done this is that this is included in your licensing subscription, and we'll touch on that towards the end. But it's an all-you-can-eat service, so they're not doing it on a per-minute basis, per user per minute basis. You can use this as much as you want. So it's quite different from some of the other platforms that are available where they do charge you in that kind of way. So it's a free fall. So it's not the charging mechanism isn't preventing you from adopting this kind of technology. We have Skype Meeting Broadcast. This is a platform that allows you to get in touch with up to 10,000 people at one time. The advantages here are that the participants, as opposed to the presenters, have less functionality. So they can do less in the meeting. It's easier to control them. It's easier to understand what they're doing. You can't see who else is in the meeting. So, for example, if a CEO wanted to talk to his whole organization, they could use this particular platform, get everybody in. You're not going to have issues with people doing things in the meeting that they shouldn't be doing, being disruptive. So that's some of the meeting pieces. We'll touch on the voice cloud. I'll touch on this very briefly because Martin's going to pick this one up. The key here is about manageability, and voice, typical telephony has always been seen as a dark and murky world. It's something that's different. It's a different form of communication, so it should be treated differently. However, it really is just another form of communication, and bringing that together with a platform like Skype means that you can manage all of those different workloads, all of those different forms of communication in one single package, and that's exactly what we're looking to do here. We're looking to move from having an on-premise PBX, whether there's a step, which is a hybrid step before you get there, absolutely fine, completely understandable. It's about getting rid of all that on-premise equipment, moving it up and managing it in the same way as you would the other pieces of communication through the Office 365 portal. As I said, it's about in the short term, probably interoperating with your PBX systems, but over time, the nirvana situation is you get rid of the on-premise pieces of equipment and you move everything up to the cloud for obvious business benefit reasons. But one of the key things here, which relates back to the mobile flexible working, is ensuring that you can receive and make and transfer calls wherever you're working from. So if I picked up my PC now, appeared in Costa Coffee 10 minutes later, I'll still be able to get those calls. Now, obviously, there's other ways of doing this. We've got simultaneous ringing and call forwarding, so you can receive them on your mobile devices. But basically, I pick this up, I move away. So I'm no longer tied to a desk just to pick up the phone. So the next thing is Skype across different devices. I've touched on some of these, but there's this already. We have clients for Windows, Android, and iOS. There's the in-application deployment of Skype, so you get basically you get the presence bubble surfaced in different applications, and this could be tailored. The standard ones, you know, it perhaps would be SharePoint. You see who's authored the document, see who's been involved, hover above them, and you've got all the communication methods, so you don't have to keep going back to the client in order to do this. And then we're bringing this whole into the meeting spaces. So people will be familiar with Skype for Business Room systems from other providers, Surface Hub, which is directly from Microsoft, and then the next version is Project Rigel, which is about using a Windows 10 device in a meeting room to provide that same functionality. So it's ensuring that the meeting rooms can become part of a meeting along with remote participants as well. So it's ensuring that everybody has that same experience. And the last one is around the operator of Microsoft services. So as it currently stands, you are not able to call directly out from Office 365 out to the PSTN. At the minute, you have to come back on premise to do that, and Marty's going to touch on how we do that. But at the beginning of July, 1st of July is the date they've given us, is you will be able to take those telecom services, those carrier services directly from Microsoft, and you will be able to call directly out from Office 365 out to the PSTN, which is quite a major step forward. In order to ensure that we have a good connection back up to Office 365, ExpressRoute is highly recommended here. And if you haven't looked into this, I suggest you do this, as well as looking at your own sort of network capabilities, because it ensures that we have that quality of service that's needed in order to make sure that voice is an enterprise class as it sits on the Skype for Business platform. So that's some of the advancements coming. One of the other things that they announced the other day, from June the 1st, they're going to introduce consumption billing. This is relevant within conferencing, the PSTN conferencing piece I mentioned before, because that didn't include an international dial-out, but it does now, and they will just charge you for the amount that you use. Also, with the PSTN calling, the package is structured in such a way, if you went for a domestic package, each user within your organization would get 3,000 minutes of calls. If you went over that, you would be charged more, and that's how it's done with the consumption billing. They will charge you for the extra. But how they've structured it is that you basically, every individual user gets 3,000 minutes. They will pool those number of minutes between the organization on one single tenant. So if you had 1,000 people there, you would basically get 3,000 times 1,000 number of minutes that could be used across the whole of the organization. So somebody may only use 100 minutes, somebody may use a lot more. So they're dealing with it in that way. So it's not as hard and fast as perhaps people are realizing. Okay, so I've quickly run out of time, so I'll move on to the next slide here. Just very quickly looking at some of the business benefits of Skype Online. If we look at the online piece before, some of the classic arguments that we talk about, reduction in software, reduction in service, data center costs, etc. If we're looking at PBXs, We are now moving away from a situation whereby you have to buy expensive PBXs, you have to have the support maintenance contracts that go alongside it. We're also giving you the option, because often with a traditional system, you would have to buy the devices that sit alongside that particular PBX. So we're kind of breaking that model and saying you can use headsets, you can use handsets, you can use Bluetooth devices, whatever you want to use. If you do the user profiling as you're setting it up in the first place, you can decide what's the right device for the right user. So we're giving people a lot more choice, and there's obviously cost benefits of doing that. We're moving to a position of vendor consolidation. You don't need somebody separate managing your video conferencing, your audio conferencing, your web conferencing. We're bringing it all together into one single package, one single interface. So in terms of end user, support is much easier. It's easier for the end user to use it, and that's vitally important if you're going to get your return on investment. And also it's easier from a training perspective as well. I touched on the user management before. Voice is now treated as just another workload within Office 365, within Skype. Touched on the phone number follows the user, so wherever you're going, your number will go with you. Choice of deployment options, which Martin's going to touch on. You're now in a continuous innovation cycle, so when Microsoft brings something new out with Office 365, you have the option of adopting that piece of technology. It's not going to be a difficult thing for you to make sure that your users are on top of the latest functionality as it comes out. You've got predictable pricing because the way they price Office 365, you know it's going to be this amount per user per month unless you go over the amounts that you're allocated. And it also, just touching very briefly on the end there about return on investment, it's going to allow you to reduce your estate, travel costs, mobile flexible working, all the classic kind of arguments that we hear for adopting a piece of technology like that. So I will now hand over to Martin, who will take us through in a bit more detail around the technology. Over to you, Martin.
Cool. Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. So my name's Martin Bohm, so UC lead here at Visual. So I guess touching on this slide here that there's multiple deployment choices and options that you've got with CloudPBX that you're looking at, whether you've got an employee in Skype business, but non-premise solution, hybrid, or cloud only. So there's multiple topology choices there. Some, there's important things to consider when looking at integrations with on-premises equipment, whether that's PBXs, contact centers. That's when you really need to look at either on-premise or hybrid. So hybrid, we can have users homed in the cloud, but still leverage with an on-premise presence integrations with on-premises equipment. Cloud only is a cloud only solution. All the PSTN calling is done via Office 365 and in the cloud. So if we look in the technology and go for a deeper dive into those topology choices. So if we look at, what is CloudPBX? So we've run previous webcasts on CloudPBX, and you can find them there at that in the URL there. It provides telephony capabilities within Office 365. Currently, at the moment, it's not providing full what we call enterprise voice that would be on premises. So if the telephony capabilities at the moment is dial in, dial out, pull forward in, simultaneous ring. If you need, as we talked about, integrations with PBXs, if you need IVRs or contact centers, you would have to look at a hybrid approach to leverage the CloudPBX there. CloudPBX, it gives us the opportunity to move, the telephony into the cloud completely or partially. So, partially we're looking at a hybrid deployment. We can home users that can be in and use the cloud-only solution, and then we can leverage users that are on-premise. So on-premise examples could be people, if you're using enterprise voice, using response groups, you need that ring groups, hunt group functionality. You could home those on-premise, and for example, if you've got users, more mobile users out on the road, or users that just require dial-in, dial-out, they could be homed in Office 365 and leverage CloudPBX. So we look at the deployment models. We've got with CloudPBX multiple options. We've got CloudPBX with PSTN calling. So this is a cloud-only solution. This is leveraging Microsoft as your carrier. So the PSTN calling, the billing, the dialing in, dialing out is all through Office 365 and Microsoft. You can easily provision users with telephone numbers via the Office 365 portal. You get options on dial plans, whether that's local, domestic, international calling, and you can easily provision numbers there. There is going to be a porting ability, so if you already have PSTN numbers that you wish to port to Microsoft, then you can look at doing that at the moment. So CloudPBX with PSTN calling at the moment in the UK is in preview. It is being used live in the US. So the other option with CloudPBX is CloudPBX with on-premises PSTN calling, and that's what it's referred to as hybrid cloud. So this is having users homed in Office 365 using CloudPBX, but all their PSTN calling is coming via on-premises deployment. So in this scenario, we need some on-premise either Skype for Business server, or there's something that's just been released called Cloud Connector Edition that provides that connectivity to the on-premises PSTN. So our inbound and outbound calls are coming from an on-premises solution, not from Microsoft or Office 365. So you can choose either to look at that with CloudPBX, the power to choose and to look at those solutions, whether that's hybrid, cloud only. If you've already got an on-premises solution, you can look at creating, building hybrid, enabling CloudPBX, adding those licenses to your tenant, and then using that. The CloudPBX with on-premises PSTN is released now, so you can look at using that now. Or cloud only will be coming shortly. And that's been announced, we believe, to be the 1st of July. Currently in preview, we're using that and testing that. And that'll be available in the UK. If you do have an Office 365 tenant and you are interested in looking at CloudPBX with PSTN calling, highly recommend you look at the Skype preview website and sign up there and go through that. Not only just for CloudPBX, but for other preview features and functionality that is coming with Skype for Business. I'd highly recommend you look at there and get signed up and look at the other preview functionalities you can test and look at.
I think, Martin, I'm right in saying there that you can have some test users there that could be using the CloudPBX or PSTN calling, and then other users that you're just not going to touch. So you've got the ability to dip in the water there, haven't you, of CloudPBX to get an idea of it without committing the whole environment and the whole user base to it.
Yeah, one of the great things is you can build that hybrid now, as you say, test and have a look at that, but also plan a migration, so you can plan to move at your own speed as you need to. You can move users from on-premise to online, and likewise backwards from online to on-premise as well. So you've got that full flexibility to move users as you need to plan a migration at your own pace and speed, so you can plan and look at that. Yep. It's highly recommended to look at hybrid as the topology now, where David touched on broadcast meetings, CloudPBX. There is some online-only features, so to leverage the best of both worlds, hybrid is highly recommended if there is a requirement to have some on-premise footprint. So yeah, that's really good. So I'd highly recommend looking at that. So if we look at CloudPBX with PSTN calling costs, for CloudPBX it is inclusive of E5. So the E5 license that I think David will touch on a little bit more is licensing that has become available. CloudPBX is part of that. You can also add it on, so you can add CloudPBX on to existing E1 or E3. But E5 provides the best value. There's a lot more things, as well as CloudPBX, PSTN calling with and PSTN conferencing with E5. So it'd be worth having a look at that to get the best value there. We do need to add additional calling plans, so CloudPBX will allow us to do that hybrid, so we can leverage the on-premises PSTN. If we want to look at PSTN calling, that's where we need to look at, we need to add those additional calling plans for users to make and receive calls. Based in 2 plans, we've got 3,000 domestic minutes, domestics, or domestic plus 600 international minutes. So you can see the options there that you can have a look at, having that pool of that minutes that people can use. Some people may use more, some people may use less. So if we look at CloudPBX with on-premises PSTN calling, it's covered with E5. There's no additional calling plans required. It utilises existing infrastructure and hybrid configurations. So let's touch on. So it's a minimal investment, even for businesses without on-premise Skype for Business. So you can really sort of leverage your existing infrastructure hybrid if you've already got contracts and with the on-premises provider, or you want to retain that on-premises provider. Then you can still keep those contracts in place, and we can move them to move users to CloudPBX. We touched on this earlier, Cloud Connector Edition. So Cloud Connector Edition has been released that will allow you to leverage the on-premises PSTN. It really provides that that gateway to CloudPBX and the on-premises PSTN. Cloud Connector is free to use. So it's free to use in terms of you don't need to license Skype for Business. There is a cost in terms of the Windows Server license there, just to be aware of. Cloud Connector is it provides virtual machines. So there's kind of 4 virtual machines. It's a minimal topology footprint for an on-premise Skype for Business solution to provide that integration to CloudPBX. So that provides an easy way. It is perfect for greenfield deployments. If you've already got a Skype for Business linked server on premise currently, then you really need to look at can we enable hybrid, or is there a preference to utilising Cloud Connector Edition? There is one consideration that you can't run both at the same time. So there is some consideration to have a look at that. But Cloud Connector, it runs Hyper-V. It has VMs in a box. You can add multiple Cloud Connector editions to provide high availability. So it's giving that flexibility again to enable on-premise PSTN for those CloudPBX users. So CloudPBX and PSTN calling, that there are some limitations currently. So as Office 365 evolves, I would assume and think that some of these will be addressed. So in terms of desk phone support, so CloudPBX is supported with the Polycom VVX, some of the Link Phone Edition handsets. So when we look at the Polycom HPs and what was the Astras, you do need a specific firmware on those handsets, so you need to make sure that they are the latest editions to ensure that those desk phones and handsets can be used. We can use functionalities such as call answer. We can answer calls, put calls on hold, receive, transfer. We can have some simultaneous ring, so there's some calling options there. Voicemail. So voicemail we can leverage, I believe, from the Azure voicemail. But we need to be careful around Exchange and things like that. It can only be used as a deployment model with Skype for Business Online users, so CloudPBX with PSTN calling, unless we look at having that hybrid topology. we do require interoperability, coexist with legacy PSTNs, we can plan migrations at our own pace. So that's where we can look at utilising that hybrid, doing it at our own pace, planning. And at the moment, you can try before you buy. There is a 90-day Office 365 E5 trial provided. We can provide that through Visual. You can look at either using Cloud Connector or existing Skype for Business on premises, and you can convert trials into a long-term solution if we need to look at interoperability on premise. So David touched on PSTN conferencing. So PSTN conferencing is now available in Skype for Business Online. It's now not longer only an on-premises feature. We can allow people to have their meetings online and have the ability of people to dial in via the PSTN. And that may be that you've kept and had an on-premises solution just for PSTN conferencing, where now you can move your meetings to the cloud. We can use the PSTN conferencing dial-in features from Office 365. Previously, you were able to do this via a third party, and that was quite costly, expensive, wasn't as integrated as it could be. So now Microsoft are providing this, and you can bolt this on with existing licensing or under the E5. It allows you to, if you had your meetings on premise, move them online, use the PSTN conferencing, and then obviously you're leveraging the Office 365 infrastructure, not leveraging these large meetings on premise. So that may be of an advantage to looking at that. At the moment, PSTN conferencing through Microsoft is available with, it's from over 30 countries at the moment. That is growing and growing and growing. I would think in the next months we'll have even more countries that are available. You can sort of enable this all through the Office 365 portal. We can select regions where we want the telephone numbers. We can add them. And as David touched on, the inbound PSTN conferencing, there's no extra cost for those users to dial in from that. The business considerations, I think cloud hosted telephony, it's definitely there. It is in use. It is the future that people can now look to leverage this to move, their telephony into the cloud as well. There does need to be important considerations around how do we connect to CloudPBX? How do we provide that network connectivity to Office 365? It can work over the internet. You can have, it's not recommended to have a look at that because we can't ensure the quality over that internet connection. We can't apply the quality of service that we did have on premise. I think moving from an on-premise solution, there still needs to be design and consideration and planning around CloudPBX and connectivity to CloudPBX. That's why we can look at leveraging the Express route for Office 365. So Express route will allow you to have a dedicated connection to your Office 365, and it'll allow you to apply quality of service to that and have management of that. And it's complete data security is now standard, so there's some accreditations there. Also, you can see those at the URL that we've got there. In terms of guarantees, moving to the cloud transfers risks and accountabilities to Microsoft. Office 365 is now covered by financially backed SLAs, so if SLAs are important, that is only growing and growing and growing. Claim service credits with SLA breaches. And there is some SLA documentation there that we've got on the URL there that you can have a look at and have guarantees around the service that is being delivered by Office 365 and Microsoft there. So there is some assurances to the service that obviously that will be provided. As we touched on before, online, there's a lot of new features coming. and having to keep up with those. Some of these are in the clients, some of these are in online, offline messaging. That's one that I know a lot of people were asking about, offline messaging in Skype for Business and Link. So if you were sending messages and people were offline, sometimes you wouldn't get that. You get that perhaps in your Outlook, but now you can get it natively in the client. CloudPBX for PSTN calling, as we touched on, that's coming. At the moment it's preview, but in the UK it will be highly likely to be around July time. Cloud Connector Edition, that was released, so that allows us to do CloudPBX with on-premises PSTN. Organisation, auto-attendant, broadcast meeting enhancements. So broadcast meetings, as David's touched on, I think there's going to be more enhancements to that service. Project Rigel, that in terms of video, Polycom Cloud, video integration service, unified management analytics. So that there's a wealth of new features and functionality coming that you can just turn on. If they're online, you haven't got to do additional deployments. You can look at leveraging all of that functionality and making users more productive as and when these features are released. And if you want to have a look at some of these, as we touched on, the Skype preview program is ideal for getting early access to some of these features and testing them out for some users. So I think now I'll hand back to David, I believe, for the licensing overview and next steps.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Martin. So first of all, so let's have a quick look at the licensing. I mean, we've touched on this a couple of times already. With specific reference to CloudPBX, there are two ways you can license this. One is part of E5. The new Office 365 SKU that was released in December of last year, and the other way is doing a step up on your existing agreement. If you do happen to have the old E4 license kicking around, then there are some recommended paths of upgrade for that, but that's probably worth a discussion offline around that. So I just wanted to give just a 1 minute on E5. Because there seems to be a little bit of confusion of what's exactly in E5. So from a very high level, there are sort of three pillars of functionality. Modern collaboration, which is the ones you can see in green, personal organizational insights, which is the ones you can see in purple, and the people-centric security, which is the ones you can see in blue. If we look at the modern collaboration, the E5 license would include the CloudPBX license, unlimited PSTN conferencing license, Skype meeting broadcast, and I've also added in the bottom there that the PSTN calling is an add-on SKU, but obviously that is only relevant if you have the CloudPBX license in place. The Power BI Pro and Delve Analytics are both part of E5, and we actually have a further webcast next Thursday, I believe, around Power BI. So if business intelligence is something that you're looking at as an organisation, it may be worth coming along to that. But the difference between the free version of Power BI and the Pro version is around the amount of data it can consume and what you can share and the business rules and the sort of packs that come with it to ensure that it works as an enterprise tool, rather than just as a one person looking at what they can access. Delve Analytics is a personal productivity tool, allows you to understand who you're communicating with, where you're spending your time, what you're doing outside of work, who you're not communicating with. So it gives you an overview of what your day, what your week looks like. So you can take steps to sort of remedy things if they're not going in the right direction. And then we got three bits of functionality on the security side of things. Customer lockbox, basically it beefs up the process to say whether Microsoft can or can't have access to your data if a support call is raised. Advanced threat protection is looking at zero-day attacks, so in terms of malware and links, to ensure that they are safe enough, or is considered safe enough to to allow the end user to continue to look at the email or click through to a different website. And then we've got an e-discovery piece as well. So if you're conducting an investigation into somebody within your organization because you suspect they may be involved in fraud or illegal activity, you can use that tool as well. Word on the street is Microsoft are looking to put some additional functionality into E5 in the near future, and it may well be around the security pieces. So certainly worth looking out for that. So that's E5. If you want to have a discussion on E5, we can certainly pick that up afterwards.
Is it worthwhile just mentioning there, David, that I'm thinking the reasons that people are going to be wanting to be interested in CloudPBX or Power BI and those sorts of things, they're going to come through, I guess, from the requirements from the organisation. But where customers have already got an E3 subscription, as an example, then the step-up cost to E5, that's the bit that I guess needs to be justified. And if you come into the end of life of a PBX, or you're looking to deliver your telephony services perhaps in a different way, then that really lends itself to be able to drive value out of your Office 365 licensing costs. It's the step-up cost from sort of what you currently got to E5 that you need to consider over and above, if you were to go and replace a PBX elsewhere.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of organisations have kind of been waiting for CloudPBX to be released because they like the idea of it. They like the idea of being part of Skype for Business. And I came across an organisation the other day that had a 28-year-old PBX, which I can't imagine is particularly cost-effective at this stage, and is probably a little bit behind the curve. So people have been kind of holding on for this technology to come out. So yeah, absolutely. If you're considering E5, you probably want to bring in different parts of the organisation to see what other parts are going to benefit from doing it.
Sure.
So just skipping on to the next slide, there's a couple of offers on for Microsoft at the minute I just wanted to highlight. One is specifically around the CloudPBX adoption offer. This is relevant if you want to deploy CloudPBX with PSTN calling or with hybrid, depending on the timing of this. It requires you to purchase a minimum number of seats, 150 in this case, and they will give you an initial 10K investment for a 50-seat deployment, which you could then use with a partner such as Visual, and then they give you an additional $10 per seat, up to a total of 50K for that piece. So if you include the initial investment, you could potentially get $60K. Apologies for using dollars. This is the American Microsoft rules of this particular offer. So as you can see from that, it's it can become pretty cost effective to deploy CloudPBX if you take advantage of some of these offers. On a broader piece, just moving on to the next slide, there is an E5 promo offer which runs out at the end of June. That may well be extended beyond the June, but as most people know, the end of June is Microsoft's financial year, so they're keen to ensure that people are looking at their renewals and anniversaries at this particular time. This is applicable for E3, E4, and ECS customers. ECS, if people aren't aware, is the Mobility Suite plus Office 365 E3. So it's basically those customers stepping up to E5 as well, and they're providing a 15% discount on that step up. I would also suggest that if you are considering E5, it's probably worth having a conversation with Microsoft to see if there's anything more they could do against the licensing pricing, because I think they're particularly keen on this at this time of year. But that's I didn't say that. So anyway, moving on to the last slide in terms of next steps. So three basic things that we can do here. We have an offering called an architectural design session. These are one-day sessions on site with one of our consultants, and these can either be specific to Skype for business, or they could be voice specific, or they could be much broader if you want to look at Office 365 or EMF, whatever it is. It's basically a way of you using our consultant to bounce ideas off of, if I take the example of the voice one, how could I deal with contact centers? How am I going to look at deployment? What should I do around devices? What should I do around this? What does a rough architecture look like? And we whiteboard an architecture. And what we generally find is that customers have a number of questions going into looking at a particular technology. and they have a number of questions, and how is that going to work within their environment? So by looking at an ADS session, it kind of answers those questions. It looks at the business benefits. It looks at where you are and where you want to get to, and it's just a really good way of just finally understanding things before you make that decision to move ahead. These are fundable by your DPS days if you have an enterprise agreement. So you potentially could use some of the days on your enterprise agreement, or in fact you could convert some training vouchers to use these as well. So architectural design session is a recommended first step. You could consider a proof of concept, or as Martin touched on, we do have demo environments that we can use, or sign up for the Skype preview that Microsoft have running at the minute. If you need any help, please get in touch with me and I'll help do that. But we've aided a number of customers getting online and making sure the Polycom phones work and the users are up there and everything's running to tickety-boo, so you can test it for yourself to make sure that it works. So those are the recommended next steps. Before we open for questions and answers, Martin or Brian, any final thoughts?
No, I think it's one of these things where, I would encourage all customers who are looking at telephony services, or perhaps who are looking to make their workforce a little bit more agile. There's certainly lots of people in public sector who are looking to reduce estates and therefore need their workforces to be able to work from multiple locations, or be much more moving around areas, working from different buildings rather than being tied to a particular building. If you're looking to do any of those sorts of things and allow people to work from anywhere, then Office 365 telephony really allows people to do that. Whether that telephony is delivered by your existing PSTN connectivity that's on-prem and you've got that hybrid connectivity, or whether you're going to move your telephony connections into Office 365 completely. It's one of those things where it's a real enabler for people to be able to work agile, and if that's on the business's agenda, then this is the kind of technology that's going to allow you to support that for your businesses.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't think we've got any questions on IM. Do we have any? We can open up the phone lines, as they say on telly. Does anybody have any questions?
All very quiet.
Yeah. Any questions about this or anything related to this?
I've got a question then. If nobody else is going to ask one, I'll ask one. How quickly does it take to? So if I wanted to do, CloudPBX and get some telephone numbers from Microsoft and get a user enabled for CloudPBX with PSTN calling, how quickly does it take for me to set that user up? Assuming I'm already using Office 365, I've got an E3 SKU, so I might have my mailbox in there. If I say today, right, okay, I want my user to be enabled for telephony using CloudPBX, how long would that take? I guess that's probably going to be a Martin question.
I think it's Martin.
Yeah, so I guess adding CloudPBX PSTN calling license, so it's from the portal you can go and add those services. Once we're talking minutes really. Once we've got those licenses to the tenant, we go in there, license that user for CloudPBX PSTN calling. We go to the Skype for Business Admin Center. In there we can see voice users. From there you have to define some emergency locations, and then once they're defined, we can request. We can say what region do we want our numbers from. So in the UK, in the preview, we can see what we've got. We select the region. We say how many numbers we want. It gives us a range of numbers. And then we assign it to a user. We assign the PSTN calling plan for what that user would have, and that will filter down to the client. So we're talking minutes really, which is that ease of use and speed is phenomenal really. When you think back where we were when you want a phone line, you have to order a phone line and then wait for the phone line and. All these things, yeah.
But you mentioned there about having sort of region-specific numbers.
Yeah.
So that's presumably possible. You know, you can select a Newcastle number or a Bristol number or.
Yeah. So at the moment, kind of, I think that, they're focused on the major cities at the moment. And that, it's only expanding as the CloudPBX is evolving really. So you've got that flexibility. If you've got users that need to have presence in certain locations and cities, that you've got that flexibility to choose specific regional DDIs for them.
I suppose at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as you can publish a number that somebody can call that person on, doesn't it? Really? Yeah,
and I mean, the porting process, from what I've seen from the US and stuff, that seems to be all being handled through the portal, unless you've got multiple thousands of DDIs. Then you can obviously talk to Microsoft and get help through that process. But otherwise, it's everything from the portal, really easy process, which gives power to the admins to do it themselves.
And so, and also in terms of disaster recovery, because everybody's always worried about DR for their telephony, so by moving your PSTN connections and all of your telephony capability into the Microsoft Cloud, then essentially you don't need to worry about DER any longer. As long as you've got an internet connection and you can connect to Office 365, then you can receive your calls and you can make your calls, and Microsoft will become responsible for all of that service availability then,
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's ideal. Considering moving sites in the future, and this needs to be a consideration. As you said, touched on DR. The cloud is hosting all that PSTN service and telephony for you. You just need either an internet connection, and away you go. You can use it. So.
Cool. I'll give somebody else an opportunity to ask a question if anybody's got any.
No. I assume no.
No, I think one for me to touch on that, the handsets and things. So the Polycom, the VVX, they're heavily investing in developing solutions for CloudPBX. If people have requirements for handsets, can fully use those with CloudPBX. So
it's one of those scenarios where a headset is a given. And a handset, there's a few different handsets that you can use to connect to Office 365 as well,
Yes, and just the consideration when looking at and maybe proof of concept and using those, the VVXs, you need to be on a software version that allows that CloudPBX, and I think now you can buy the VVXs with the specific software on them. So,
so that you should be able to purchase them, and so they're just good to go then,
Yeah, good to go without any additional software upgrades and things that you need. So,
cool.
Okay. Last shout. Any more for any more? If not, thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time. You've got our contact details. I think Molly will follow up with an email after the event, giving you contact details and that kind of thing. But if there's nothing more, then we'll close down. But thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, David.